Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mireya, and I am Sonoma Land Trust Bilingual Youth Programs Coordinator. That just means that I know both English and Spanish, and I work with kids all the way to young adults. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can ask questions in the comments section. And if you're joining us on Zoom, use the Q&A below to submit any questions you may have. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So if you're ready, let's get started. I'm gonna share my screen with you real quick. Just a second. All right. So Sonoma Land Trust is a nonprofit organization, which means we rely on donations from people, businesses, and foundations to make our work possible. One of Sonoma Land Trust's goals is to protect important and beautiful land in Sonoma County, which we'll be talking about today in our adventure into a salt marsh ecosystem. So here's a picture of really beautiful land here in Sonoma County. The land that we protect is important to us because it does a lot for animals, including us humans. So what do you think this land might provide to all of us? I mean, it provides quite a bit. It provides habitat and food. It provides water. And it also provides a place for us to have fun in nature. We believe that if the land is healthy, then our community is also healthy. We protect land for many reasons. One of those reasons is that people, like your future kids, if you decide to have any, when you get older, can enjoy it in the future as well. So what does it mean exactly to protect land? Well, it means to keep land safe. At Sonoma Land Trust, we protect land to make sure that there is space dedicated to preserving nature for our community and the wildlife that we share it with. So maybe you're asking, why do we need to keep land safe? Or maybe you're wondering, what are we keeping it safe from? Well, I want you to take a look at this picture here. What do you see? This is a picture of Petaluma. And there's quite a bit here, right? We see some kind of mucky looking water. There's quite a bit of buildings, houses. There's a bunch of stores, maybe banks, and grocery stores. There's also a mountain out here and some trees. And if you're studying this photo, you're noticing that we really need a lot of space to live the ways that we do. So we need to make sure that some land is also protected for the environment. As our populations continue to grow, more buildings and roads are built. So organizations like Sonoma Land Trust make sure that our cities don't grow to be too big and that there are still places for animals and plants to live. Also to make sure that humans have a place to visit nature. When we protect land, we're also working to conserve it. So maybe you've heard of this word before, conservation. That's conservation, the act of preventing wasteful use of natural resources. And natural resources are the materials we find in nature that can be used by humans. Let's take a second to come up with some examples. While you think of some, I'll be thinking of some too. Okay. Did you think of any? I did. So I thought of water to drink. For those of us that eat animals, that eat meat, there's animals and plants as well. Trees to build with, land for farming, or to live on. Wow, nature really gives us so much. And here, the land in Sonoma County is especially important, as Sonoma County is a biodiverse place. In fact, California is the most biodiverse state in the US. So what do you think this word biodiverse means? Let's take a second to break it down. So if you look here, here's bio, and there's diverse. So when you think of bio, you might be thinking of the word biology, which is the study of living things. And then there's diverse, which means a variety. So when you put these two together, then that just means a large variety of living things in a given area. Pretty neat. So let's come up with some examples of some living things. Ready? As you think of some, I'll be thinking of some too. If you're feeling brave, go ahead and say them out loud. Are you ready? I thought of you and me. We're both living things. The birds outside my window chirping right now. Cats. All the plants outside like trees. And there's also daisies. There's so many types of living things. Sonoma County has a lot of different kinds of plants and animals, and that means it's very biodiverse. Here's a few types of things that we have. There's redwood forests, coastal prairies. Look at those beautiful cows. Oak savannas, rivers, estuaries. That's where the fresh water of a river meets the tides of the ocean or sea. And beaches, we definitely love beaches, don't we? And in some places, biodiversity can tell us whether a habitat is healthy or unhealthy. Take a look at this picture here. It's a jungle. Now I want you to close your eyes and let's imagine being in this jungle. What do you hear? Do you maybe hear mosquitoes maybe flying by? Or maybe it's some other type of gnat or fly. What do you smell? Do you maybe smell the plants? Maybe it's sweet aroma of flowers. Maybe you're seeing some birds, colorful birds flying overhead. Now open your eyes. Did you imagine quite a bit in your jungle? Do you think that a healthy jungle habitat would have more types of plants and animals or less types of plants and animals? So would it be more biodiverse or less biodiverse? A healthy jungle habitat is more biodiverse and has lots of different kinds of plants and animals. There's many organizations that help protect land. You might have heard of National Park Service before. And you might have heard of the US Fish and Wildlife Service before. So in the US, there's 419 park units. And there's 560 wildlife refuges. Quite a bit. And we're lucky enough to have a wildlife refuge really close to us here. So when you think of these, you might think of the similarities and the differences. Some similarities are that they both work, or they're both under the Department of the Interior. They also help protect wildlife and vital ecosystems. But a big difference is that when you're out in the Fish and Wildlife Service area, you are not able to camp, while at National Park Service, you're more likely to be able to camp. Both work to protect wildlife, but wildlife refuges prioritize creating a network of habitats. So their biggest priority is to protect the wildlife and natural resources. Here we have two endangered species at San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge. That's here in Sonoma County. Here's the salt marsh harvest mouse. It's really cute, sitting on top of some pickleweed. And the Ridgway's rail. These are both endangered species. An endangered species is a species of plant or animal that it is at risk of extinction. And that means it's in danger of disappearing forever. A species becomes endangered when the population declines over time. For both the salt marsh harvest mouse and the Ridgway rail, their population has declined because of habitat loss. And habitat loss means that the natural home or environment of an animal is disappearing. There can be many reasons that this happens, but that is why Sonoma Land Trust protects land where endangered species live, so that they do not lose any more vital habitat. So here's a map of some protected lands. You can see here, this is called a legend, and it shows us our preserves, conservation easements, and other protected land. And there's quite a bit here, and maybe you've been out to Bodega Bay before. That's a protected land. There's quite a bit here, and you'll notice that there's protected land out here in Lake County and Napa County. Everyone works together to try to protect very important land. The wildlife refuge of San Pablo Bay is right around here. And we work together with partners like agriculture and open space so that we can protect many of these places too. And they also believe that protecting open space is important for both humans and animals. So there are 3 ways that we protect land. Well, we own land. We also create protected parks, and we protect other people's land. So when Sonoma Land Trust owns land, it is because either we bought it or someone may have donated it to us. We manage the land that we own by checking in on the land and making sure that it's healthy, and that is providing us with benefits of a healthy habitat. If it is providing us with benefits of a healthy habitat, then we leave it alone and we observe it, which means that we go in and we check on it to make sure that it's continuing to be okay, that it's still thriving. But sometimes when we own land, it is not always healthy, and we have to do some repairs to make sure it works properly and is providing us with some benefits. This is called restoration. Sometimes we may even buy the land because it is not healthy. Some of the land that we own is accessible to public, but some of it is not. When we do not allow people there, it is usually because the wildlife needs a place to rest away from us. So the second one is that we create protected parks. And sometimes Sonoma Land Trust will take the land that we purchased and give it to other organizations, transfer it over to organizations like the National Wildlife Refuge System and regional parks. The third one is that we protect other people's land. Owners of big pieces of land often work with Sonoma Land Trust to protect their land, but want to make sure that they can enjoy it too. Working with the owner, Sonoma Land Trust develops a written set of rules for what people can do and cannot do on the land. And even if the owner sells the land, the rules stay with the land forever, and that land will always be protected. An example of a rule would be that they cannot build any types of buildings like restaurants or homes on the land, or that they aren't allowed to cut down any trees. So using these examples, I'm gonna paint a picture for you. Ready? So here's Georgia. She's a landowner, and she's a landowner of some beautiful land here in Sonoma County. Georgia loves her land and wants to make sure that even though she sells her land or leaves her land to her children when she passes, that it will be protected and preserved forever. So Georgia decides to call Sonoma Land Trust. And we tell her that we can create a conservation easement for her. That conservation easement is a written set of rules that a landowner agrees to. The written set of rules is a promise, kind of like a pinky promise, that the landowner makes with Sonoma Land Trust that they will not break. So Georgia decides that on her set of rules, that buildings will not be built, that trees will not be cut down. Those are the rules that both of them agree on. A couple years later, Georgia decides that she needs to sell her land. She wants to move away. And when Bill buys the land, so then a farmer named Bill wants to buy it. And when Bill decides that he wants to buy this land, he understands that he cannot break any of these rules. So Bill is unable to build any buildings or cut down any of those trees because those rules are stayed in place so that the land can be protected no matter who owns the land, meaning the land is then protected forever. So those are the 3 ways that we protect land. And that's exactly what we do with San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge. We bought the land and we transferred it over to San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge. So we work with the Wildlife Refuge staff to manage and protect this beautiful land. And it's a really important piece of land, and that is why both of us work to protect it. And this Wildlife Refuge has a wetland on it. Do you know what a wetland is? Well, wetland is exactly what it sounds like. A wetland, or a piece of land that has a lot of water, so it's usually very muddy. There's also different types of wetlands. So maybe you've heard of a swamp before. Yeah, it's exactly that, where Shrek lives. Usually there's lots and lots of trees in a swamp, and there's a lot of swamps on the southeast coast of the United States. For example, Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Here we have a marsh, and marshes are full of grasses, unlike swamps that have lots of big trees. Marshes are very biodiverse, and they hold lots of different types of plants and animals. So let's take a second to watch a video of this very important habitat. Ready?
For over 100 years, man-made levees, tide gates, and pumps kept a once vast and thriving marsh drained of water and diminished in life. Then, in 2015, through the leadership of Sonoma Land Trust, the levees were breached and the tides returned, restoring a wetland that had existed for thousands of years along the shores of San Pablo Bay in what's now southern Sonoma County. Since the late 1800s, we've lost almost 90% of the wetlands surrounding the bay. But conservation organizations like Sonoma Land Trust are reversing the trend and restoring these critical habitats for wildlife and people. With this 1,000 acres restored, we now have the opportunity to witness firsthand the evolution of this area from diked farmland back into a thriving marsh and document the return of the once seemingly limitless avian community. Concurrent with restoration efforts, Sonoma Land Trust, aided by biological consultants and citizen scientists, began monitoring bird populations within the Sears Point restoration area. From 2016 to 2019, monitors conducted seasonal point count surveys to obtain data on annual richness and abundance, and habitat associations of water birds. Survey results were submitted to the California Avian Data Center to improve our understanding of long-term avian demographics and to make the information accessible to habitat managers, scientists, and curious citizens of the Bay. Some of the various species found at the site include the long-billed curlew. North America's largest shorebird has an estimated population of just 140,000, but is readily observed at Sears Point, probing its very long beak into the mud searching for aquatic invertebrates. In the same family as the curlew, and seen here feeding together, is the long-billed dowitcher. The tip of its long bill has tactile receptors that allow it to locate prey in the mud. Smaller shorebirds commonly found at Sears Point include the western and least sandpiper. The mesmerizing undulations of a sandpiper flock in flight is a sight to behold. Amongst the shorebirds, you may also spot some dabbling ducks, like these common mallards, or birds that dive for food, like these western grebes. Underwater sonar surveys confirm that these birds know where the food is. Marshes are not just for the birds, however, they're also critical for people. Tidal wetland restoration is gaining momentum in the conservation community as we learn about new threats from accelerated climate change. Marshes are one of the best habitats on Earth for sequestering carbon. Wetlands also provide a buffer to sea level rise and storm surges, all the while filtering pollutants from runoff. In just 5 years, with a little help from us, nature has reclaimed the marsh at Sears Point and provided habitat for countless birds, fish, and invertebrates. And as the threats from climate change accelerate, we will continue to ally with nature to provide us with the best answers in our quest to adapt to this ever-changing world.
Wow, That was a beautiful video. So just like trees, these salt marshes help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is what we call carbon sequestration. That's how nature takes carbon dioxide out of the air and into the environment to store them in things like plants. Marshes also help us defend ourselves from flooding due to sea level rise. You can think of marshes a lot like sponges. So I have a sponge here to kind of show you exactly what I mean. So these marshes, they have a lot of grass like you see in this photo here. And when water comes in, that's when high tide comes into these marshes suck up all of the water. And that's the plants doing quite a bit of work there. So at first, I had quite a bit of water in here. But now, there's way less. Just like that, these marshes help prevent flooding into our towns and cities that surround the bay. Here is a map of the San Francisco Bay Area, and on the left, you can see what it used to look like in 1800s. All this green right here used to be tidal marsh. And with the most recent data that was collected, here's a map on the right of the Baylands in 1998. There's a huge difference of how these marshes have changed. And this side, you see how very little we have left. The marsh at San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge is a part of this large marsh system. And San Pablo Bay is the most northern marsh of the San Francisco Bay. It's right here. So you can see as to why these marshes are so important to protect. So here is a picture of the Bay of Fundy in Canada. Can you guess why these boats are on the ground like this? Well, this is the image of low tide at Bay of Fundy, and it has the largest tidal range in the whole world. Here it is at high tide. It's the exact same spot. In this area in the Bay of Fundy, the height of the ocean changes around 25 feet a day. There are other parts of the Bay of Fundy where the tides can range up to 40 feet. So I'm going to share with you a time lapse of exactly what happens. So here's the water coming in. And you can see these boats rising up. That's pretty neat, isn't it? So this happens twice a day. When water rises and hits its peak, that is what we call high tide. And after water level hits high tide, then it begins to fall. And it falls down to what we call low tide. So as I mentioned, there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day. And even though tides change the height of the ocean, we describe what it usually looks like as sea level. So sea level is that halfway point between the high and the low tide. So we use sea level as a way to measure the height of different things, like mountains, hills, and deserts. Here's some examples. Well, here's Sonoma Mountain, and it's 2,500 feet above sea level. That's pretty tall. And here's Death Valley. Death Valley is 280 feet below sea level. That's pretty low, and it looks pretty hot there. Let's play a game of trivia. So, do you remember what biodiversity means? Well, biodiversity is a large variety of living things in a given area. Did you get that one? What about wetlands? What are wetlands? Do you remember? A place with a shallow layer of water. Yes. And what about marshes? What are marshes exactly? Well, they're wetlands, right? And they're covered in grasses. And do you remember what a national wildlife refuge is? A place owned by the government, and it protects animals and natural resources. Very good. And what are some examples of natural resources then? Water, plants, animals, and land. Great. And what about tides? What are tides? Right, the rise and fall of the height of the ocean. And sea level? The height of the ocean halfway between high and low tide. Well, so next I'm gonna play a video for you. And maybe you don't know what levee is and you don't know what breach is, but maybe after I show you this video, you'll see and learn.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Were you able to figure it out? So you can think of a levee kind of like a wall. Here's a levee here. And it holds water in or out of something. And breaching is to open or break through something. And that's exactly what the excavator, this is the excavator here, is doing here in this picture. So it's opening up this levee here, and it's allowing the water to enter. So that's exactly what happened at San Pablo Bay, so we could restore the marshes that were once there. Although the salt marsh harvest mouse continues to be on the endangered species list, hope is not lost. As we continue to restore marshes, we help to provide more vital habitat for these cute critters, benefiting both us and nature. So that concludes our presentation. And if you have any questions, we'll start answering them right now. So someone asked what park units are. And park units, the reason why we call them park units is because there are national parks, kind of like Yosemite, but then we also have historical areas that are not quite parks. They're national historic sites. So that's why they use the word park units to include all of the land that the National Park Service protects.
Thank you, Maria, for the excellent presentation. We have a few questions from Facebook that we'd love to ask you. The first question is, do the tides affect the marshes? And I think you addressed that a little bit, but maybe you could touch upon it a little bit more.
Do the tides affect the marshes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the tides do help bring in water to help the plants to continue to grow there. So it does benefit the plants there when the tides roll in.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. You talked about how marshes can help with climate change by, use the word, sequestering carbon. Can you tell us a little bit about how do marshes sequester carbon?
Yeah, so I'm not a scientist, but from what I've learned from what exactly these marshes do is that they're much like trees, that they help trap the carbon dioxide that's in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And as they soak up these carbon dioxide into the plants, they store it there. So it's replacing some of the carbon, or taking away some of the carbon dioxide that's
Mm-hmm.
in the air into the plants. And when these marshes are restored and more plants are in these marshes, that means that we have more plants to help collect all this carbon dioxide that's in the air.
Great, so it's taking carbon and carbon dioxide out of the air and using it to grow plants that now live in the marsh for a very long time, and they grow on top of each other, and it stores lots and lots of carbon in the ground, mostly in plants.
That's exactly it.
Great. Another question, people were really excited to see those cool birds. Where can they go to see those birds?
That's a great question. So that footage there was of the San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge, which I mentioned during the presentation. And that's actually a really great spot for bird watching. Although right now, the state of many parks and many areas are unsure of whether we're able to go into or not, I do suggest that if you're wanting to visit places to go see birds, that you check on websites. Like, for example, with the case of the San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge, you should check out their website to see what exactly are the regulations right now, to see if you can go enter there. And what's really great about Sears Point, which is in the San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge, is that it's free for those that want to go. There's a huge parking lot at the Sears Point trailhead, and in some areas of in some trails, you are able to have a dog as long as it's on leash. But definitely look at the rules before you go.
Yeah, it's great advice. Last question for you, and this one might be a little hard since it's not your normal wheelhouse, but I can jump in if you'd like. How much land is being protected, and is there any more land acquisition in the near future?
That's a very great question.
Well,
That is
great.
not that is not totally in my wheelhouse, but I will say that our team continues to work very hard to find areas that need to be protected. Neil, if you'd like to give a more extensive answer, you go ahead.
So the Sonoma Land Trust, as a nonprofit, has contributed to the protection of over 50,000 acres in Sonoma County. Sonoma County is about 1 million acres. If you combine the work that we've done with the work of some of our partners like the Ag and Open Space District and other conservation groups, there's almost 20% of the landmass of Sonoma County has been protected in some way or another for nature. To the question about is there any more land acquisition in the near future, we are always working on protecting this beautiful county of ours. The projects to acquire and protect land take years to make happen, and they're only possible through the generous funding of the government agencies or by individuals contributing to the nonprofit. We have multiple projects coming that should be closing soon. You can always sign up for our email list on our website to be some of the first people to know about them. And we like to share them widely on our social media when they do close. So keep tuned in, and we'll have some great announcements over the next year or so, and always into the future. That's the last of our, one more question. How can families with kids volunteer to help with cleanup and environmental care once shelter in place is over?
That's a great question. Once the shelter in place is lifted, Sonoma Land Trust will most likely be able to give some information on how you can volunteer. And you can check out our website to make sure that you're looking in to see what kind of outings, events, and opportunities you may have to be able to go to the marsh or whatever land may be open so that you can go and do your part as well.
Yeah, and if you're really interested in helping the water of our bay, there's a special day every year, although I'm not sure what it will look like this year, called Bay Day, and that's organized by the Save the Bay group. And if you want to work with or contact them, they will have opportunities for families to volunteer where you can do restoration or garbage pickup and cleanup, all sorts of fun activities. There's also lots of citizen science projects that might be good for young ones that want to get to actually do some science themselves and to help do some of that monitoring of the species, like the birds that come back after we've restored it. So I think that's the last of our questions, so I'll let you finish up.
I do have a few questions from Zoom. So someone asked, where do the mice go when the tide comes in? And that's a great question. Not exactly sure. I have seen mice that come up further up on the land. So that means that they, instead of being near the tide, they move further up into where they have more protected area in the pickleweed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the salt marsh harvest mouse eats the pickleweed, which is that little bush that was in the photos, the little red bush. And that pickleweed doesn't grow underwater very well. It grows right at that point between where the tide is coming and going. So when the tide comes up, the little mice follow. The tide doesn't come up too fast, so the mice can jump out of the way and they go higher. And then as the water level drops, they follow it back down. And they follow back and forth like that. So to make sure that the mice don't drown.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to when we hang out on beaches, and maybe at first you set up a really nice area where the water wasn't coming, and then all of a sudden you realize, wow, this water is really close to my towel. So yeah, just like that, the mice also move up. Someone else asked, when they were digging in the video, all the dirt was coming in. Does that affect the marsh? I'm assuming is what the rest of that question was going to be. Mm-hmm. So some of that, from my understanding, was that some of that dirt was actually used to create mounds in on the flat. And these mounds help to make sure that the water doesn't rush in too fast and degrade the plants and also the rest of the soil that's there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would add that all the muddy water that came rushing in as that big dam was broken, that's good dirt. We actually want that dirt to level out and fill in the marsh, because we're trying to actually build the soil higher so that the plants can be above the water. So we want as much dirt as possible and mud to come in with the water so that it will fill in that wetlands with mud so that the plants like pickleweed can grow and the mice will be happy.
Yeah. And someone asked too, what does a salt marsh harvest mouse eat? Mm-hmm. So we answered this earlier, or Neil answered this earlier. One of the things that they eat is pickleweed. I don't know if you've ever tried pickleweed before, but it's rather salty. It's very salty. It's because it's a succulent, so it holds a lot of water. So if you break a piece of this pickleweed, then you can kind of see the water there. And if you taste it, then it's pretty salty. And some people have even gone to the extent of using pickleweed in things like salad. So it is an edible plant. Just salt marsh harvest mice have adapted. They've changed to be able to eat and consume such salty water. So we'd probably think it's too salty, but mice love it. Someone else asked, how long ago did the excavator break down the levee? So I believe this happened in 2 rounds because there's 2 areas. Neil, do you know the exact dates for those?
I believe it was 2015, but it may have been 2014. It was before Maria or I were here, but we can certainly get you an answer.
Yeah, I believe one did happen in 2014, and there was a more recent one, I believe. But that was a really great question. Someone else asked, are there any small fish in the wetlands? It's another great question. So yeah, There's quite a bit of wildlife, and although we may not see it while we're out visiting, it doesn't mean that it's not there. So we might not be seeing these fish jump out of the water when the tide is high, but they are there. We're just not able to see them.
There's lots of little fish in the marshes. We actually have what's called sonar data, which is it's kind of a cool technology that looks underwater and can tell when fish swim by underneath. And we actually have seen large amounts of fish come swimming in and out. We even have some sharks that come in. And I have even seen a big ray, one of those big flat fish, a big ray about 2 feet wide, swimming along the water in the marsh. He was actually chasing me in my kayak. Well, not chasing, he was following me in my kayak. And he swam underneath me and continued on his way. So there's lots and lots of animals there. It's one of the reasons why marshes are so important, because they have lots of different critters that live there and depend on them in order to have their babies and to be safe from the big fish out in the bay. You don't want to get eaten by the really big fish.
That's a great answer, Neil. Someone asked, what is the texture of pickleweed? That's a great question. From my experience, when I've tried it, if you can imagine that middle part, like the stem of lettuce, like romaine lettuce, that middle really crunchy part, that's kind of what it tasted and felt like to me. Neil, what did you think?
Yeah, it's kind of like a pickle. It's really firm and it crunches and it's a little wet. I have a pickle right here, not because this was a prop, but because it was my lunch. So it's kind of like a miniature pickle that's covered in salt. And when you bite it, it kind of crunches and water comes out, like Maria was saying with the lettuce, but it's really salty. It's really kind of weird. But next time you're out there, come on a hike with us and we'll show you the pickleweed and you can try it yourself.
Yeah, it's rather salty. So before we go, I would like to share with you guys my screen again. And I just want to show you some opportunities that you have to continue to connect with nature. And we've offered quite a bit of activities in both English and Spanish. And we have a monarch butterfly craft book. There's 3 different types of crafts that you can do. And I do suggest doing the larva note, the I larva you note. Father's Day is coming up pretty soon, so it could be a really great gift. And we've also got Loteria, which is a bingo game that I personally grew up playing quite a bit. And we've adapted it to use nature words so that you can also connect with nature in your backyard. And we have a coloring book. And these wildflower coloring books the wildflowers are really beautiful. And you get to learn, in each of these activities, you get to learn a little bit of what about here with the wildflowers coloring book, you get to learn about the plants. And in the monarch butterfly craft book, you get to learn about the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, which I have learned so much about this monarch butterfly. For example, I, for whatever reason, did not know that they were poisonous. So that they're poisonous because of the toxins that they ingest from the milkweed plant that they eat and that they live on. So before I leave you today, I'd like to thank you for being here and joining us. And for any adults that are viewing, if you happen to be donors, I'd like to personally thank you. Without donations from landlubbers like you, the work I do is not possible. May you all continue to find connections with nature in whatever way that may be. And I hope that you take some time to maybe follow us on social media. You can use at Sonoma Lantras on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And as I mentioned, you can visit our website at sonomalantras.org/nature@home for more ways to connect with nature. And if you have any particular thoughts on this presentation and you would like to submit some comments, please make sure to email us, and you can email us at youthprograms@sonomalandtrust.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and until next time, stay wild. Thanks so much for joining us.